I believe, because of what I understand with the ancestors, is that I was that cycle breaker. And when you're a cycle breaker, you go against the grain. And when you go against the grain, there is a consequences with that. Mm-hmm. But if that be the case, it doesn't matter. The fact is that the seasoning process happened. It's the Mayafa that is advancing the seasoning process. And then there's root psychology, the discipline that I propose as the umbrella to black psychologies. I never took a black psychology course because it wasn't offered. You can't get your degree. You can recommend to your chair or whoever, I want to take this course as an elective. It's not counted. We don't have Naeem Akbar's book or Dr. Wade Noble's or Marimba Ani. We don't have Dr. Cabone's book. We have none of those books that are validated in any psychology curriculum.
But why? We have Freud, we have Jung, we have Piaget. Why don't they work for black people?
Because those mental disorders are different from mental dysfunctions. Mental disorders is just what it is. It's a disorder. The universe is out of order. The human body psyche is out of order. And there's one thing to understand about Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud and Carl J. Jung, his student, borrowed, and I want to be very clear about this. This is a fact. As you know, I was trained to do the facts. They borrowed the African or Kemetic philosophies. Mm-hmm. The Code of Ma'at, 42 righteous living principles from the Code of Ma'at, M-A-A-T. And they're listed in my book, Root Psychology. When Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum pointed out in his book, The African Unconscious, that Freud has studied significantly in Kemet and Egypt, and he brought these principles back and he twisted them. You know, he was a neurologist. He wasn't a psychologist. He was a failed neurologist. And when he brought them back, then he came up with Oedipus. And then he came up with narcissism. He came up with all of these things. The psychosexual theory and his personality theory are based on the 42 principles of the Code of Ma'at, and I have the number. And so with that, psychotherapy, based on psychodynamic theory, is like the king of therapy. We, black people, don't need therapy, or you can couple therapy with healing. What has always been a healing source for black people is spirituality. Mm-hmm. African spirituality. Mm-hmm. When you say that, though, there's an automatic negative connotation of voodoo. But what is voodoo? For those who don't know what it is a nature tradition. It is a tradition that naturopaths understand and how to deal with the leaves, the herbs, the trees. It's not about spell casting. Witchcraft came from England. Francis Galton brought that over when he saw the people in South Africa. He referred to them as savages and primitives because of the way that they worshiped or they acknowledged or reverenced the Creator and not the way that they did. So it's also interesting, Dr. Hardiman, to point out, and is that Francis Galton, Sigmund Freud, and Charles Darwin were cousins.
Say it again.
Francis Galton,
right.
Sigmund Freud, and Charles Darwin were cousins.
Wow.
So that would explain origin of species. There were two species. And this is in the book of Root Psychology. There was the hominids, and then there was the primates. Darwin studied the primates. Descendants of the primates are Neanderthals. This is anthropology. Basil Davidson, British anthropologist, notes it. The hominids, the descendants of the hominids is Homo sapiens. That's the African line. So when Charles Darwin studied the apes, do I need to say anymore? He was studying the lineages of the primates, meaning Neanderthals.
Right.
So when we talk about, back to your initial question, about disorders, one of those disorders is a lack of melanin. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not an expert on melanin. But what black people suffer from is mental dysfunctions. And those dysfunctions are a result of acculturation, assimilation, that result in identity crisis. And again, if you don't know who you are, people tell you who you are. Carter G. Woodson tells us that in The Miseducation of the Negro. You have Gordon Allport, who talks about the scapegoat theory. You have so many great black scholars, psychologists that have done the work, that have lived in Africa, that have lived in South America, singing the same song. So the problem then becomes is, what is it that these African-centered models, which is what root psychology is based on, are not accepted into the educational curriculums or mental health delivery systems? Why is it always a pill when that's not the case? So the more you take a pill for, let's say, manic depression, well, the more the symptoms are going to reiterate the criteria and vice versa, because the DSM is not a scientific book. They're just beginning to try to link it to neuroscience. There is no science to the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. There is none. It was all a yay and nay vote. And this is where the contradiction comes in. This is where policy comes in. And this is why there may be challenges with root psychology. Whether it is or not, it does not change the fact